Across the Spider-Verse is an ambitious movie that is beautifully done, sounds amazing, and has attempted some serious narrative structures. Today, we at Studio Unac are going to do a roundtable discussion of our thoughts on the movie in a way that is useful to writers and storytellers.
Alright, everybody, let's do this one last time.
My name is Spider Andy, and I'm a writer and editor. With me are Spider Cow, a comic author and a cinephile, and Spider Jeffrey, the author of Psychos, a sci-fi book that we published and you can buy now on Amazon. Introductions made, let's dive into the discussion. I wanted to talk about is something that I really care about, and this is narratives where we talk about determinism and whether we can fight it, whether fate is something that can be escaped. How did you guys feel about this part of the movie?
So you're kind of setting up this template,
Yeah.
right? Where all the characters are on this railroad, all going to the same destination, especially in a movie like this where it's literally about many different versions of the same character. So that deterministic vibe is pretty much the entire film. So I definitely see what you mean.
It's funny that the characters themselves are aware of the narrative of the journey of a Spider-Man. With little comments like Gwen saying that in every universe, Gwen and Spider-Man fall in love and something bad happens. So this is so close to Deadpool breaking the fourth wall, but barely behind that.
It peaks over the fourth wall.
Yeah. For me, the interesting thing about such stories is what kind of a lesson are we going to get at the end of such story? Because on one side, this gives you hope that you know that you have free will and that choice truly matters. And the Sam Raimi Spider-Man is about we are made from the choices that we make. And in a way, this whole thing with canon events kind of goes against that as an idea. On the other side, it can be very humbling to know that there are greater forces at hand and to just accept them.
Hi, I was bitten by a radioactive manga author. For the past 4 years, I've been slaving away inking and drawing. This movie is sort of like a postmodern look on the myth of Spider-Man. Because you talked about how Sam Raimi and this two completely opposite versions of Spider-Man. And I think this one, it basically uses self-awareness about how Spider-Man is perceived. Miles Morales trying to break away from being another Peter Parker.
I get that. Part of me that's a little cynical about it because, obviously it's the idea that right now with how superhero films, the genre is so saturated that it's this kind of thing over and over again. It's like every Batman movie has Crime Alley.
Yeah.
There should be a play set.
How many times must we watch The Mask of Zorro and see our parents die? It's that over and over. So it's like, oh, Uncle Ben again. So it's a great strategic decision, I guess, to have this kind of movie as a palate cleanser for this kind of industry at the moment, right? But there's a lot that you can do with this type of story, right? If you want to not be so cynical, you're touching on like the Friedrich Nietzsche actual real nihilism, where it's about realizing that because nothing matters, we have true free will. But if you don't, then you're stuck on this path and there's nothing you can do about it, and that's the true terror.
And also the question is, does fate, even if it's deterministic, does it happen passively, or you still need to be the action of your own fate? Like, for me, a Spider-Man story is pretty much accepting the consequences of your choices no matter what they are. Even if fate is deterministic, even if a canon event is about to happen, it makes no sense for a person like Miles or Peter or even Gwen, honestly, to not try to save the people they love. Because in the act of trying, they become that person who then has to accept the consequences of their failure. If they just let it happen, this is not really a spider person. This is a bystander of their own life. I completely understand why Miles is definitely fighting against this whole thing. And it's interesting how Miguel is also someone who has fought against it, seen the consequences, and now is actually actively trying to prevent other spider people from doing what is natural to do as a spider person, which is super weird.
Yeah, that's really cool, actually, yeah.
And it's interesting that Gwen actually is a victim of Miguel in the sense that she begins the story with as someone who accepts that her father will die, which is unnatural. In a way, Miguel has affected how Gwen's journey is bound to happen. And Miles is the person who fixes this by showing her or provoking for her to seek a way for things to be different and for her to keep trying. So I think that they've been very aware of exactly what's going on with each of these characters related to what's their opinion on this whole canon event thing, who is going to do what with this scenario. And yeah, I'm really interested to see how such a story will continue in part 3 of the trilogy. I would say that Legacy of Kain, the game series, also has this whole narrative of everyone is bound by fate, other than one specific character that creates paradoxes. In Legacy of Kain, this is Raziel, and the anomaly of the Spider-Verse is pretty much Miles. So it's interesting to see how he will affect this whole story. And what is the end lesson that we'll get as viewers?
When you talk about examples of how you write for stories about determinism, you look at Legacy of Kain as the example, pretty much.
First of all, I wonder if each remake of Batman implies that it's another remake of Mask of Zorro. I highly doubt it. Because there's like a 1941, 1975, and a 2005 one. I guess we were missing one for the newest Batman. And second, on determinism, I think this movie's interpretation of it is right that it's not fate itself telling you don't have free will. It's rather like an actual person believes that he's taking in his hands fate itself. In this case, being Miguel O'Hara, being the person who says that everyone's future is determined to fit the Spider canon, and Miles, like it or not, has to also play in that role. Otherwise, he'll destroy his respective universe.
It's a great idea because it plays on that one concept of what Spider-Man is. Because if I have to boil down Spider-Man to one thing, it's responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
So he chooses to take responsibility for his actions, which is the Spider-Man thing to do. And by doing so, Miguel becomes the big villain for the film.
I love that. They play with the idea that every Spider-Man that accepts responsibility might actually end up on a different side of the conflict. And they're all heroes of their own journey because they have to do the responsible thing. This is what turns them into a Spider-Man.
So this is a very prolonged journey for Miguel O'Hara, huh?
It's his journey on trying to remember what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man.
Yeah. It's interesting that he's the one that's disconnected from the frame of a spider person as a personality, because even Spider Noir, who is depressed, he's depressed in a funny way. Like, even he has this natural sense of humor, or to create humor around himself, even if he himself is not funny. And yet Miguel is just outside of that frame, which is really interesting, that he suffers from the consequence of his decision to go to that other universe in such a way that he really has lost the Spider-Man way. So I would think that in movie 3 we would see some sort of a transformation for Miguel.
Sometimes I let matches burn my fingers just a few anything.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. This is something that Spider Noir says, and for him this is
a joke.
No, for him this is sad, but for us it's funny. While Miguel doesn't say anything that for us is funny. Like, the humor is just not part of the spirit of Miguel.
Yeah, which is the opposite of what usually Spider-Man is like. And I mean, they even put in Scarlet Spider, which is,
Yeah, just make him reflect the 90s edginess of comics.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's right there being the most, my tragic past. And it's very funny to see how the person who is seriously the most tragic here, which might be Miguel, has basically, instead of turning that whole thing into, this is a comedy film, right? The comedy of him is that he's so straight as a straight man in all of this that it just goes away. When he's in the scene, funny happens around him. It's never with him, which is a great way to immediately signal to you that of all the Spider-Man here, he is extremely distinct.
Well, another thing we don't see exactly is, I've noticed people talking about online, is how the people in the Spider Society really love Miguel, not just as a leader, but as a close personal friend. Peter P. Parker, he says that he loves showing kid pictures to Miguel. He says, he's gonna love this, implying that they've talked about being parents in the past. And Gwen also thinks highly of him and says that he's someone who is entertaining, if I remember correctly. So that we don't see a side of Miguel that everyone else sees, and that's the reason why they accept him as a leader of the Spider Society. We only see the one Miguel that hates the fact that the universe is falling apart because of one person.
You know, this is a weird comparison to make, but Undertale does this.
With Asgore?
Yes, exactly. Everyone throughout the whole game talks about the character and what he's like and how he is, and you see only the tiniest shades of all of that when you actually meet him, and then you realize it's just everyone else projecting onto him on what they and what he is a very broken, sad person because of what he did. And you know everything you need to know about him in the very first interaction you have with him because of all the setup up to that point. And they do a great job with that in this movie too. It's very efficient. They don't need to have so much screen time for Miguel because everyone else can do the screen time for him.
It's interesting that one of the few characters that did not do an exposition on Miguel is the Spider-Man that talks in exposition only.
Wait, which one was that?
When Miles is running around, there is one Spider-Man that chases after him, which is one of the 90s Spider-Man, I think.
Scarlet Spider.
Is that him? The one that is like, I'm looking at the wall. There is no one on the wall.
Yes, Scarlet
Alright.
Spider.
The edgy one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've chosen Andy Samberg as a perfect choice of someone who knows how to hawk up a performance.
Absolutely. Oh, the voice acting is just perfectly done for everyone in this story. Like, they knew what they were doing. Speaking of different Spider-Man people, Kao, I think your topic is about something that relates to that.
Nice segue. I was looking at this movie as like a person who enjoys watching movies about Spider-Man. Despite whether or not like I thought the movie was good or not, I always feel like I can enjoy one, even like the Mark Webb ones. And like considering that this is basically like at least the fourth Spider-Man franchise we had in the past 20 years, I had to look at this movie from a meta level. And hey, this movie also likes to use postmodernism's favorite subject, meta-narratives. And so this movie definitely uses, as you mentioned earlier, peeking over the fourth wall to tell a part of a story that we all, I guess, had to address, and that's the role of Miles Morales as Spider-Man. Since this movie uses the Spider Society, and specifically Miguel O'Hara, as a stand-in for basically the comic book community, and the way they all try to keep the canon, never break canon. Whatever anything that has happened to a Spider-Man should happen to a Spider-Man, and any deviation is basically earth-shattering. And it also reflects on the public's opinion on Miles Morales. To this day, no matter how many people love him as a character, there's still a lot of people who just won't accept him as Spider-Man. They believe that he should be a different character. He should be Kid Arachnid or other names I will not mention. And just saying, if you're one of those people, this movie is about you.
Yeah. To be fair, I would say that Miguel is not really a stand-in for the comic book community because
For the toxic part.
I would not even call him the toxic part. I would say that he is a stand-in for the gatekeeper person that is part of any fandom, be it music, comics, movie. They're always these guys, and sadly they're quite loud. Funnily, Miguel is not really loud, but he's very assertive in his gatekeeping.
Oh yeah. You better let your loved one die.
He basically breaks, the philosophy of Spider-Man, Spider people. Everyone is saying that, if you don't let this person die, that you can get out of Spider-Man. But like Spider-Man always says, people, no, these people are supposed to die. Otherwise, you're not Spider-Man. Yeah, this should happen. This should not break canon. If you don't, these events don't go down, then you're not a real Spider-Man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny how people can't accept like someone like Miguel O'Hara because technically he's like a Spider-Man from a different timeline. He's from the future. But then you have like Gwen, who also became Spider-Woman in, 2015? Something like that. During the first run of the Spider-Verse comics. But I guess they just don't accept Miles because he was basically introduced as like a replacement in 2011 when the Brian Michael Bendis wanted to end the Peter Parker run of the Ultimate Comics. which in its of itself was a really good decision because I do believe that the Ultimate Spider-Man is, coincidentally, the ultimate version of that character because it gave Peter Parker a beginning, a middle, and end, and also holds up the idea that anyone can wear the mask. That's why Miles Morales stepped up because he was inspired by Peter Parker's final moments, both in the comics and in these movies. And
Yeah, no, it sort of represents the idea of what the character is going for, right?
you too can become a hero.
And in a sense, by the way, we can say that Into the Spider-Verse, the first movie, is about Miles accepting himself as the replacement, as the other Spider-Man, the person who will eventually fit, as Stan Lee says in his cameo, which, by the way, is my favorite Stan Lee cameo in any Marvel movie.
It always fits, eventually.
Yeah, for me, that's a key part of the movie. And in this second movie, we actually have the world having to accept Miles as a Spider-Man. And we can see that some people have already did, even the police in the face of Miles' father. This new Spider-Man is also someone who works for the community. Like, they do not chase him like Commissioner Gordon would chase Batman. Yet the other Spider people, or at least Miguel, is yet to accept that. Yeah.
I guess as long as, even if he's not the Spider-Man they've had before, he does what a spider can, so he's our Spider-Man. Just saying, even in a vacuum, just looking at these two movies on their own, kids earn the title. Let's face it.
And also, as an antithesis to Miguel saying that Miles shouldn't have become a Spider-Man because the spider that beats him is from another universe. Yeah, but Miles actually doesn't participate in the events that trigger
the spider going into the other universe.
Yeah, exactly. The person who does this is Kingpin.
I don't think it's him, by the way.
Or the scientist that is the Spot.
No. I think like some other, what was it, Hard-On Collider sent the spider into that universe, and that's what inspired Kingpin and Liv Octavius to create their own Hard-On Collider. Because I actually rewatched bits of the first movie again, and by the way, I love the fact that you can see they set up the building blocks for the sequel, even in the first movie, like things you never noticed. Like at the beginning, you can see the spider in a Hard-On Collider being sent to another universe. Then later, when Miles finds the dead spider, you can see it glitching, hinting that it's not from this universe. It shows that this sequel wasn't made after the success of the first one. It was planned from the beginning.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that this means that because how they sort of portray it, like that all of the other spider people from the first film basically all knew already who Miles was, and all of this was a big farce, right? But yet all of them lied to him except one, and I can't believe it. It's Peter Parker.
Of course.
Peter Parker is the only one who actually tells him the truth, and he said, sometimes you can't save everybody. He's the only one who tells them the truth. No, he's the one who's straight up, which is very funny. That the literal Looney Tunes inspired character is the one who's being real.
I'm glad we get to see him in the next movie.
Absolutely.
I'm a big John Mulaney fan.
Because we're talking about all this, right? It all comes down to good thematic writing. That's what I prioritize, right? So, look, I think thematic writing is cool. You should too. Without it, you don't have a soul in your writing, right? It's a weird thing where you can get everything right. You can do the technique. You can write the dialogue that flows. You can create characters that are dynamic. You can have the precision in all these techniques. But then if your story doesn't feel like it's about anything, nothing is left there to resonate with. And there's always this problem, right? Because especially in how literature is taught, the literature class thing where it's like, oh, this is Robinson Crusoe. You have to write an assignment where you suss out the themes from the story, and now you give evidence in the story of why this theme is the case, right? That's so clinical and horrible. It's such a bad way to enjoy stories or analyze stories, right? It completely ruins the whole thing.
It's the predecessor of AI writing.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah. So it's not that the thematics and understanding that they exist here and there is not important. It's just that that's a very weird way to look at it. Like you take Spider-Verse 2, right? And I'm not sure if you really noticed, but the amount of plot in this movie is pretty huge. There's a lot of plot. My God, there's so much that happens, right? And it's a comic. It's animated, so it's larger than life when it comes to characters and so on. It's a comedy, so characters can act unrealistically, but that also means they can be, no pun intended, they're more animated. And so you can really push the thematic elements in the writing, but of course through the like art and music and other aspects of the film, right? Just all the filmmakers have to come together to sort of deliver on the themes. And there's always this danger when it comes to like thematic stuff where it's like if you're not the creator and you're the audience, it's old school Freudian
Yeah.
psychology. If you look hard enough, you'll find a dick pretty
Yep.
much anywhere,
Fair.
right? So if I ask any of you here, like, oh, what was like the key like sort of takeaway or like theme you got from the movie? So maybe like Andy, you would say the whole fighting determinism, right?
I don't think that would be my first answer, but that's something that I spotted because it's something I care about. I wouldn't say that the casual viewer would see determinism as a key point. Maybe it is, but in a reframed way. Being responsible with your free will.
Okay, that's interesting because that will lead on to something I have. What about you, Carlo?
My biggest takeaway that we should respect more animation.
Okay, fair enough.
But that's not the team. That's not the team, Kao.
It was my takeaway.
That's the meta takeaway, you know?
Yeah, like I because me and Andy saw this movie together, and like the first thing I said once over, like it was sort of facetiously but sort of genuine. Can we like stop or at least put a hold on live action superhero movies and like make more animated ones? Because this one just blows everything from the past 5 years out of the water.
Sure, but taking a slightly cynical note on that one, I remember when I was watching the movie with a friend, I said to them, so none of the artists got to see their families for months, huh?
Yeah.
Like there's clearly an insane amount of additional work that was not necessary for the film to succeed or deliver on what they wanted to do, but they went for it anyway. It probably cost them a lot in terms of
Hours.
their budget
Yeah.
and time. I mean, they probably were like working ridiculous hours to
Yeah.
make this happen, and at least it really came together in the end, right?
I think this is a good moment to just say thank you to these animators that most likely have really sacrificed a lot of their man hours.
If I've read correctly, there was almost 1,000 animators working on this.
Then this is one big thank you to those 1,000 animators for delivering this eye candy to us. And I don't say eye candy in any way as a degradation. Like, this is a beautifully done movie, especially Gwen's universe. Any scene where Gwen is in her own world is so well done. It reminds me a bit of the game Gris.
Yeah, it's impressionistic painting. Yeah,
This movie is just visually a treat and something that we can spend countless hours rewatching it and learn something useful from it.
It's one of those key moments in cinema where a certain franchise managed to elevate and like put its place in the history. Like this is like a key moment. Like how, you had Lord of the Rings back in the day, which elevated what a blockbuster movie can be. Before that, it was Star Wars. This truly shows the power of animation. Like it shows that not realism should be the end game. Because you have Disney, who will always be Disney, and like their points. If there's more rendering effects, then it's a better movie. And like you have DreamWorks, who are really embracing like the creativeness of these movies. Because the past couple of DreamWorks movies are all made in different styles. Like I love Puss in Boots, who basically had like a oil painting feel to the entire thing.
man. Oh man, I would love to talk about Puss in Boots, but it's out of topic.
Okay, tangent. Let's start talking about Puss in Boots.
I love that movie a lot.
Same.
It's funny, I actually think between this movie, Spider-Verse 2, and Puss in Boots, based on my personal preferences, I like Puss in Boots 2 even more. The Last Wish was that good for me. But in terms of like visual like presentation, no matter how great that film was, what was shown here it's no exaggeration to say they went really above and beyond what was expected. People had insane expectations for like the visual prowess, right, that would show up in this sequel, and I don't think anyone was ready. Carlo, you know more about like how the ideas of like the color, and maybe Andy, you know more about the music part of it.
One of my subjects is color and music, but I think that's saved for later to not break canon.
Oh, okay.
But it is something, everyone feel free to join in once we get there.
I suppose I should just clarify a bit about the whole thing about thematic writing, right? Because everything that we've talked about now has this interesting through line for me. Because if I have to pin what this film seems to be going for, weirdly enough, I don't see this being talked about anywhere else. But I feel like a core theme of the film is actually just the idea of punk, like the punk subculture, right? There's so much of it that's just pervasive everywhere. You have obvious poster boy Spider-Punk, Hobie Brown, who is very interesting because he's actually Prowler originally. In like how he's Hobie Brown is supposed to be Prowler, but for this film, and this is based on a specific comic line with the Superior Spider-Man, I think. So
I think I remember that.
yeah. So that's why Hobie Brown isn't Prowler, it's Spider-Punk here. You have obviously this punk character who is surprisingly pivotal in the plot and the formation of Miles's sort of journey in this story, which should hint a bit about that, but yet I don't really see it talked about. Yeah, when you have like the idea of punk, right? It's this whole concept of being nonconformist, iconoclastic, and guess what the movie's whole story ends up being, right? Fight the canon, oppose the spider myth, defeat determinism. I am who I am. You see that with Gwen. You see that with how she portrays herself to her father and her identity. You see the same thing with Miles. You see the same thing with so much of the film. And this whole idea of the punk theming about not conforming, that's actually where the original Miles Morales character thing came from, right? There was this huge concept of urbanism with how they did the original Miles Morales, right? You have migrant families, you have communities that are all about embracing each other. That's a huge part of punk, and even from like Miles' original like design with the hoodie and everything, right? Sort of evolves into what we have now, and now you see if Miles is like level 1 punk, then level 100 punk Spider-Punk shows up, right? And it's like, let me show you how to be an anarchist. you know.
Yeah, but also like all the spider people like gravitate toward Hobie. They just naturally like him. Like Gwen and Paviter.
That's crazy. He's the most popular character to everyone else that isn't Miguel O'Hara.
And like as soon as like the regime becomes a fascist utopia, he's like, all right, I'm out.
Yeah, he stays, but he's like, I don't know, I don't trust this. And as soon as he sees that this has become this totalitarian thing where we want to impose our will on other people, that's bad. I'm out, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not just out, I'm gonna bring it crashing down by giving the keys to the kingdom. And he goes on to be so influential behind the scenes. He sets up the way for Miles to escape. He sets up the backup for Gwen. So you have all this. Even though he's the poster boy, you get this punk feeling throughout the whole film. So, yeah, anti-establishment is everywhere.
I would like to imagine how Miguel explains to Hobie what canon event is and how he should allow someone to die. Like, I cannot see how Miguel was not wary of Hobie if Miles is your problem. And you said Miles is a level 1 punk. How did you allow Hobie, the level 100 punk, into your establishment?
I think he felt the necessity to include every Spire person except for the anomaly.
I would agree with that. This actually is a point for Miguel, for him understanding that their society is stronger for embracing every Spider-Man, but he does not accept Miles as a Spider-Man at all.
Yeah, because you're not Spider-Man, you not get to be part of this because you're a fake, which is also a very interesting thing because that's a punk thing as well, the idea of being a poser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have this thing where it's like, oh no, hey Miles, you are not a real Spider-Man. You dress like Spider-Man, you talk like Spider-Man, you may even act like it, but you're not Spider-Man. I'm calling you a poser. that's a punk thing. And it's weird that Miguel is the one
Yeah.
doing that, right? Like I said, this whole thing of the punk idea, I feel, is everywhere in this film. Maybe it's a little bit of that Freud see the dick everywhere, but
Yeah.
now that you know about it, but I don't know. It really feels like there was an active effort to carry on this idea, right? You even get it extended into like this other idea of parenthood, which is all over the parents of this film and their relationship to the children, right? You have Peter B. Parker, and you have Gwen's relationship with her father. You have this sort of three-way situation with Jefferson and Rio and Miles, right? And if you carry this idea forward, right, with this whole punk idea, you have the first movie about coming into your own, accepting to become Spider-Man and whatever, and learning to have that resilience and take the responsibility, right? And now you have the second film where you're there and you're trying, but you're not really succeeding to the level that you wanted, right? You think you could do better, right? You see that throughout the beginning of the film where, he constantly has to put out apology videos. It's like a massive, we're gonna call out Nestle Corporation about baby formula. Oh boy. Well, that's punk as well, iconoclasm. Take down the big corporation, that kind of thing. Then you have the character sort of coming into his own, and he's finding his form of Spider-Man. And now you get this idea where, I'm gonna go join a club, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna fit in, and whether they'll accept me for who I am. And yet, what is the thing the mom tells him? Rio tells him, Miles, it doesn't matter if you don't think you fit in with all of them. You have to be stronger and believe in like what you are as a person. Don't let that change. That's the punk idea. That's the I don't care what other people think of me if I stay true to myself.
Never let anyone tell you don't belong.
Yeah, that's the exact thing, right? I find like talking about thematics so interesting because it's like this, It's not about just, you point out the evidence, fine. No, it's you look at the evidence and you sort of see how that relates to everything. It's only a good form of thematic writing if it makes you excited to talk about the movie, to think about it. If you watch something that was technically brilliant and then you leave and then you never think about it again, clearly it didn't have much of an impact.
Exactly, yeah. And after all, to understand the movie's theme pretty much means that
you got to connect with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this will somehow ask you the question, how am I going to relate this to my real life? Am I now going to start acting in some different way or start reacting to things in a different way? Like, I remember as a child, every such movie, like, for example, Spider-Man 2, you exit the cinema as a 5-year-old kid or whatever, and you're like, I want to be a hero. I want to be a Spider-Man. Or I want to do the things that Spider-Man does. And it's not about the swinging on the buildings and stuff like that, but it's about being an active character, an active hero of your own journey. And
it's about saving people.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you can't save everyone.
Yeah. And saving people can be such a small thing, and Spider-Man stories do it very well because this is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Helping the old woman on the street is a Spider-Man thing.
That is Spider-Man. That's something like MCU just forgot after like the first movie. Spider-Man's supposed to be stopping bank robbers and like getting cats out of trees, not fighting dimensional beings.
Yeah, I think that's a natural problem with them including Spider-Man as a character into such a big universe. He's dealing with smaller stuff, and even the whole Mysterio thing where he was like, this is an Avengers level threat, like they are, I think Disney are aware of this and they're playing around with it. So I would give them a pass.
I mean, they did do a decent job, like Homecoming, right? Actually made it small scale again.
Yeah, it was stopping like a guy trying to steal expensive technology to sell it. That's it. And then the third one, I made a spell that's going to destroy the entire multiverse. We got to stop it by fighting famous characters from other movies that made more money than us.
Honestly, this movie, Spider-Verse 2, kind of does this as well. The world is at stake, or worlds are at stake. Yet we're going to be dealing with small detailed problems that are part of the everyday life. Like, we're going to have this super long scene with Miles and Gwen and his mother. Okay, yeah, the world is going to collapse, but also like for you to fix the world, you actually have to fix your inner intimate world, which is the small scale Spider-Man world. And I think they very well translated Miles's relatively small world to quash with this huge problem, which is the Spider-Verse collapsing.
That's what it is, right? Spider-Man's always been the people's kind of hero. It's why he was the only major successful comic series for Marvel before they almost went bankrupt, remember?
Yeah,
Like,
He saved Marvel.
Yeah, Spider-Man is the only thing that was like really propping them up anymore. But why? Because Spider-Man's a regular person. That's the idea, right? It's not Bruce Wayne, I'm a multi-millionaire, billionaire, super rich, and
or you can even say Tony Stark because they're actually part of the same world.
yeah, sure. Like yeah, if you want to compare to the other Marvel characters too, like all of them are either like weird aliens or so on. Very few are just a regular person in regular circumstances being forced to
Yeah.
take responsibility for something they weren't ready for, and they grow into it anyway, right? And they try to turn the tragedy into something empowering.
Absolutely.
That's Spider-Man, right? And so you want to make a postmodern film like this, at least you do it right, and I think they did do it right, you know.
And I would even say that I congratulate Disney's MCU on the idea that they paired Tony Stark with Peter Parker. Because of that, Tony Stark also is a character whose theme is pretty much responsibility, but his scale is huge because with Tony it's about he as a individual, not Iron Man, but Tony Stark as an individual is high in the authority of the world, in the hierarchy of the world, and his responsibility is a different kind of responsibility to that of Peter Parker, who is the small nobody, who also needs to be responsible. So both characters in the MCU are done very well with this bipolarity of small responsibility, big responsibility. And what happens when one fails with this responsibility? For example, the Ultron scenario, and so on. I think we have more to talk about Spider-Verse. So, Kyle, what are you going to tell us about color and music for this movie?
It's brilliant. Short story long. I already mentioned this movie elevates the media of animation. It shows that basically nothing is unreachable when it comes to creativity. I just absolutely love how they use the concept of the multiverse to its fullest extent when it comes to animation forms, because every single universe has like a different art style. Like Miles, his universe is, this comic booky pop art style where all the Kirby dots and like the hue shifting things in the background, they're not out of focus in a traditional way. They're basically giving like the chromatic aberration. You know how in 3D movies you have the red and the blue next to each other to create a 3D effect. That's how the backgrounds in his universe meant to show depth by just shifting the different hues on different layers. Then you have Gwen's universe, who embraces like the girl punk rock style and all the watercolors everywhere. They just keep shifting, and like the line art is almost just indistinguishable. It almost fades away between the colors. It's just these big like pastel blocks everywhere. You have Noirs, we've only seen a little, but it's black and white. It's like that Frank Miller art style, where it just uses heavy shadows. Spider-Pig, his is basically Hanna-Barbera, Looney Tunes. Penny's is anime. Paviter, his universe is actually really inspired by Indian comic books, because they use a lot of pencils and a lot of like saturated colors. And of course, Spider-Punk, his universe is like this crudely cut out poster universe where everything is a mix between real life photographs using different magazine cutouts and letters to build everything up. Like he just walks around everywhere with like a background on him. Every frame he's like almost made out of different elements.
Yeah, it's not conforming.
Exactly. Yeah, and like I love how like the backgrounds, they're not static, they're dynamic. They shift and change depending on the scene and the characters and the mood. Like Gwen's universe, that scene where she's talking to her dad in the beginning and in the end, every reverse shot has like a different background with different colors and like the depth of the background is different. You know, it goes from like this flat telegraphic flat angle, it becomes more and more wide angle. Like it becomes almost claustrophobic. Every time as the more she talks to her dad, and like the colors reflect her mood. Like half the time, they're not colored in like human colors. Like sometimes her skin is purple or pink or green, and her dad is like yellow, and it just shifts. But like you believe that these colors belong in these characters because of the way the director set up the scenes.
The way it seemed to me, especially with that like conversation, was that every time they switch up the way the scene looks, it's them doing a new story beat. It's like the beat has changed in the pacing, right? Oh, the emotion is about this. Now a retort came in, and now we change. The emotion has shifted. So the colors shift. And it just felt to me like if you're already going to go with this impressionistic style, why not take so full advantage of it? You're already all going to never see your families, right? So you might as well.
Wait, us or the characters?
Well, I guess if we talk about this movie any longer, yeah, I guess even us.
Yeah, but also Miles. Like I love how they use also colors with him to represent his mood, because a lot of time he's surrounded by red and blue, you know, representing his Spider-Man persona. But like a lot of times he's also surrounded by green and purple, which obviously alludes to his Uncle Aaron and the Prowler. 'Cause, you mentioned how Spider-Punk, his comic origin was that he was supposed to be the Prowler. And I'm pretty sure they did not make it this way in the movie, because they basically gave that plot thread to Miles, because apparently he was supposed to be the Prowler, but like that spider coming into that universe and biting him changed everything. Because even in the first movie, when he first meet like the Peter Parker of his universe, when they sync up, at first Miles is surrounded by green and purple as a background, and as soon as he and Peter look eye to eye, his colors change to red and blue, showing that like basically his entire storyline has changed.
Yeah.
And in this movie, they continue that thread when he ends up in the wrong universe at the end.
Yeah, where he meets Kilometer Morales.
Kilometer Morales.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like again, green and purple is such a predominant color. It shows that this is the universe where basically there is no Spider-Man, there is the Prowler. And it shows like a dark what if that Spider never showed up. Like, because our Miles will probably end up like that, because he also looked up to his Uncle Aaron.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny that you mention it, because that whole thing there with the Miles as the Prowler, that's a what if comic. I'm curious to see whether they can sort of stick the landing, I guess, because the first movie kind of was designed to stand on its own. This movie is very much tied to what's coming next, Spider-Verse 3.
That's actually the last thing I wanted to talk about, and it's exactly this narrative structure, which I call the Matrix 2 style of narrative. The first part of the movie can be a standalone. Its ending is well tied enough for this movie to stand on its own. You don't need the other two parts of it. You have then The Matrix 2, which for me it's a really amazing movie. And just like Spider-Verse 2, it introduces two big threads that are not resolved in the movie itself. And instead, it relies on the third movie to resolve both of these threads and to resolve all the confusion and all the emotional, psychological conflicts from the sequel, from the second movie. And here we have exactly this same type of structure. And I would say that I never hated The Matrix 2, because when I watched it, there was already The Matrix 3, so I could watch both of these movies. And for me, this trilogy is very nicely, perfectly wrapped together. I understood why the person that sat next to me and Kao was so angry at Spider-Verse 2 when it ended like this. Apparently, there was some sort of a marketing where the studio were saying this is part one of a story. But then this marketing kind of changed. So, for example, me and that other person, when entering in the cinema, we didn't know that this movie was going to be an unresolved narrative story.
Oh yeah, me too. I had no idea.
I guess I'm the only one who knew, because when that first teaser came out a year and a half ago, the scene where Gwen shows up in his room. I specifically remember that they marketed Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I guess they decided to change it up because the whole Part 1, Part 2 got tired after, I don't know, what was the last franchise that did it? Harry Potter or Twilight? One of those.
And Dune.
Yeah, Dune as well, but like that, I think that's when they decided, okay, next part will be Beyond the Spider-Verse.
Everything will be fine if the third movie delivers.
You call it Matrix 2 story thing. I call it Back to the Future because it did it 15 years earlier.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree with that too. Yeah.
Like you can say something is, for example, like a duology or a trilogy, right? Where
Yeah.
they are meant to be seen together. Sometimes they are so separated from each other that they might as well be different things, right? Like Final Fantasy games, which have numbers on them, each one is a completely separate thing. They're only tied together by ideas like their game design and so on, right? But
Yeah.
the narrative is not connected. Then you have things like you say, Matrix or whatever. Of course, there's Lord of the Rings, right? With the 3 movies being tied together that took I don't know how many years for all 3 to come out. A big thing, and this is going to affect Spider-Verse 3. They have to get this movie out fast. And that's a big problem. When you have this style of story, right? This is a big reason why something like The Matrix Reloaded was so panned, right? Yeah, okay, if you don't like it for its pacing problems and all that, yeah, that's justified. But thematically, it is sound. But it is only really poignant when you watch it with the third.
Yeah.
But what happens? You watch Reloaded, you feel a little off balance by how weird it is. And then it's so unresolved that you don't get to see any proper development of its ideas up until years later when the third movie shows up.
Exactly.
And you lose interest.
My opinion on this is, I guess, if you look at it as a Miles movie, yeah, it's a part 1. But if you look at it as a Gwen movie, it's like a complete film.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the saving grace for the structure they went with.
I felt like I felt satisfied with the way like they wrapped up like the Gwen story. Like I guess to a certain degree, the mini arc of Miles' parents. Basically, they were the entire time on edge with the fact that like Miles is lying to them, he's being rebellious, and like that talk they had with Gwen showed them that they can't trust him becoming the things they want him to be.
Yeah, and I would say that if Spider-Man, if the Spider-Verse 3 delivers, these 2 movies together will have had enough time to develop all these interesting ideas, and we'll see even more of that in the third movie. For example, for me, the romantic relationship they're pushing with Gwen currently is very well set up because this movie pretty much gives us Gwen as a character of her own, so she is not only a romantic interest. Like, she is an entire character with her own problems that happens to be also the romantic interest for Miles. So if Spider-Verse 3 delivers, this will be a very well pieces of puzzle. I would say that I wouldn't recommend this type of narrative structure to young storytellers, people that are just entering into the industry, or actually I would say if you don't have 10 years worth of experience, don't go in this direction with this type of trilogy structure. Like, there's so many ways to flop with this thing. And you really have to guarantee that a third movie will show up. Like, you really have to guarantee that this will happen.
Well, nobody plans for this structure. It just happens. Like I said, all those franchises who did this structure, they did it by accident because they made one movie. It made a lot of money. They was like, okay, we got to make more now. And let's make a second one. But, people love trilogy, so let's start working on the third one as well. So 2 and 3 usually worked on together, and they try to fit in with the first one.
Yeah.
Things like Back to the Future, Matrix, even The Godfather, they all fit that way. Whereas things like Lord of the Rings, they are 3 movies that are basically a 3-act structure of one story.
Yeah.
And when you do multiple entries in a franchise to be part of one overhaul story, that's risky, that's difficult, and I wonder why it's as popular as it is, considering how often it's not a very good and safe bet to make.
I would actually say that still this is more monetary sane than doing three movies that are standalones. While we were researching the marketing strategies for Psychos and other books that we were planning to publish, most authors, book authors say, we make more money by serializing. It doesn't matter if the series are good or bad. If I make a three-chapter story and the third part is so good that it makes everything it makes the series successful, then obviously everyone will be buying the first and the second even if they're not good,
because they want to get to the third one.
yeah, exactly. So I think it makes perfect sense, even if they fail narratively with a trilogy, that would still be a financially sane idea.
Yeah,
For them.
I can see that, right. If you liked Yakuza 0, maybe you'll try one of the other Yakuza games.
As long as it communicates that it's a part of a series, because you have, I would say Yakuza 0 is quite a standalone experience. Like, you don't really feel that desire to try the other ones, or at least for me. We've watched Spider-Verse 2. It would be insane for us not to watch Spider-Verse 3, because we've pretty much dedicated 2.5 hours of our life to get invested into a story, into a narrative. Now we want to see the end of the picture, pretty much. So, even if the movie flops, even if people have bad reviews for it, we would go and watch it just to feel the whole thing completed.
You say that, but I still have not seen Rise of Skywalker.
All right.
Good on you.
You're consciously fighting this marketing strategy.
You are the chosen one. You're untainted.
I'm level 5 punk, I guess.
Hell yeah. And I hope we leveled up our listeners today. Thank you so much for listening to this roundtable discussion. Tell us what you think in the comments about the movie, about the topics that we discussed, and whether you like this type of format for us to do it again with some other interesting story that we all found, fun to think about.
Also, if this movie doesn't get the best animated picture next year, we riot.
Hell yeah. And Jeffrey, final words from you?
Yeah, go watch the movie if you somehow decided to listen in and you haven't seen the film. This is probably incredibly confusing because we didn't bother clarifying anything. But yeah, you should watch it, I think. Even if you know how the movie plays out,
Enjoy it.
There's so much detail that's packed into everything. Like, if there's one thing that you should take away from this is that there's a lot of heart in this movie.
Absolutely.
So yeah, go watch it if you haven't. And I don't know, maybe be like my friend and go watch it again.
Yep.
He I mean, when that guy likes a movie, he watches it 3 times in the cinema. So I think he might do it 4 times for this one.
Nice. And yeah, actually, to what you're saying, I would definitely say this movie is a prime example of the creative process where people inside the team ask themselves for every scene, how can we make this fun? How can this mundane scene turn into a fun scene? And they did it for 2.5 hours perfectly. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and see you around. And if you like what we're doing, Studio Nak is an independent production house for fun things like this and more. And if you support us on Patreon, this will help us do more creative stuff. So yeah, thank you, and bye.